Today, we're in an information world. Today, the world is connected by the internet. Everything's being done digitally. And so gold will not work in that environment. It just won't. Now, they want to go to some gold-backed digital currency, but we go back to the same problem that we had in the past. How do we go, as the world has moved forward, how do we go backwards?
In today's video, Mark Moss, host of The Mark Moss Show, discusses his claim that this banking crisis is only in the first inning. He claims that he uncovered something much bigger and deeper than most people realized and could crash the entire system.
So I think back to what Vivek wants to do. I think the Fed, and actually all of politics, is set up in a way that it can't be changed or reformed. And the Fed is also the same way. So I believe the president gets to change, one seat. They get to elect the Fed board governor, but they can't change enough of the seats in their presidential term to really change, fundamentally transform what the Fed is doing. Over 2 terms, they could move more seats, but the Fed could do whatever they want to affect what's going to happen, right? They could crash the economy and that president wouldn't even get another election. So while I appreciate that, we've seen many politicians come in fired up, willing, ready to change the world, but the system is designed not to change. And so kind of to Robert's point, which is valid, maybe you shouldn't change it. I don't know if I quite agree with that as much. Right?
Robert just wants to blow it up.
Right, he wants to blow it up. But I think... and
replace it with something good and pure.
But you might have to, because you can't really change it. And set up in a way not to. Now, what we can do, though, is that their policies have diminishing returns. So when they used to print $1, they could get $3 or $4 worth of growth. Once we've gotten past 90% debt to GDP, those dollars are now not earning enough growth. So we're maybe getting 80 cents of growth for $1 or 50 cents. Now we're up to 125. So we're seeing the law of diminishing returns. So the money printing is working less and less and less. So the boat is going down. Now we could just blow a hole in the boat and let it just sink, or we could just slowly start getting people onto lifeboats and then somewhat cushion the blow when the inevitable happens. And I think that's kind of the path that we're on.
For our viewers that are still not fully on board with what a CBDC is, break it down for us.
Sure. CBDC stands for a central bank digital currency. Now, what does that mean? Well, first of all, 80% of dollar transactions are done digitally anyway. So what's the big deal? Well, a central bank digital currency is different in 2 ways. First of all, it means that I have an account directly with a central bank as opposed to regional decentralized banks that can make independent decisions. So we can go into a lot of why that's bad, consolidated the banking down to that level, but on a decentralized banking standard like we have now, then independent banks like my local area has a relationship with me, knows what my local area needs and can give me loans based off of that versus some bank in another country or, on the other side of the world that doesn't know what I need, nor do I have a relationship. And so that makes consolidation of banking will lead to a consolidation of the business. So that's step number 1. But the big problem is that money as we know it is gone. It sort of already is. Gold was money. I could hold that money as a bearer instrument. I could bury it in the backyard. Even today we have cash, and I could put that cash under my mattress or in my safe. A central bank digital currency is a completely digital currency that I don't have. What we basically have at that point is the government gives me credits. And they decide how many credits I get if I'm a good boy, and they decide how many of those credits they will take away if I'm a bad boy. They can also decide what they can do with those credits. And so the big difference here is the government can already freeze my bank accounts if they want. They can already surveil my transactions if they want. But this is preemptive. This is programmable money. So now it's pre-crime. Now it's, hey, you've exceeded your carbon score, so maybe you can't buy gas. Or you've eaten, Robert eats way too much steak, your carbon score is too high, no more steak for you. Nothing good happens after midnight, so your money doesn't work after midnight, on and on and on. And we've already seen examples of this to already know where this goes. And of course, we've seen enough of the dystopian movies as well. So that's what a central bank digital currency is. No more money. Our government gives us credits based off of how good of a state actor we are, programs in advance what we can and can't do with that money. And it's the ultimate form of control. It's the ultimate form of stripping private property.
That's right.
And taking away our ability to use that private property as we see fit. And so we don't even have that system in yet, and we're already self-censoring. Imagine how much further down we would be if once that's in place.
It's a tremendous impediment to freedom, not only freedom of movement and freedom of expression, but even freedom of thinking.
Yeah. Now we have a saying in Bitcoin, and Robert and I were talking about this, like, everything's good for Bitcoin. And the reason why we say that is that we grow through stress. We need an attack to figure out where our weaknesses are, what we need to change, what we can strengthen, and so forth. And so while we don't want that stress, that's what it takes to grow. And so these attacks that we're having against Bitcoin specifically are making it stronger, but they're also highlighting the reason why we need them in the first place. Right. And so it's pretty interesting that we have this right now where we have this Biden administration that wants to enforce this and put this in. And then to your point, we had presidential candidates here that are running on this Bitcoin platform. But I think it's not about Bitcoin versus CBDC. It's about, do you have the right, do you have the freedom to own your property and control your property or not? That's what it comes down to. And this gets a little philosophical, but it's important to understand it at this level, right? So if I'm working for an employer and I'm living paycheck to paycheck and I need that money to live, no matter how mean he is to me or what he does, I can't quit because I don't have that money. And we can think of private property as a battery, right? So I could work 4 hours to get the money that I need to live, or I could work an extra 4 hours and I could save that extra energy in this form of money. And tomorrow I could not work and I could spend it. So it's like this life battery. And so if we're not able to store our private property or save our private property, then we're a slave.
That's right.
Because we don't have that battery to fall back on.
Can we count, do you think, Mark, on political gridlock to prevent a CBDC in the United States?
No.
No.
No. So nobody wants a CBDC. There's going to be massive pushback to a CBDC. The American people hopefully would make a bunch of noise, and to your point, DeSantis and North Carolina as well put bills in to prevent it. So let's just call it something different.
Rebrand.
80% of transactions are digital anyway. We might be using CBDCs without even knowing it. So of course they're not going to call it that because nobody wants that.
But it's not programmable by the government yet, the digital transactions that we're doing. Yes, but that would require a reframe.
Right.
And
so right
reset.
now, if 80% of transactions are done digitally, I mean, I'm a strong advocate for this and I just don't carry that much cash around. I just use digital transactions. What type of software do these banks use to move it? How do they move that money from ledger to, I don't know. So if they change that and they use a different type of ledger system, how would I know? And so, and the other thing is that, unfortunately, I hate to say this, but this is the direction that we're going. This is why we need something like Bitcoin, because Bitcoin introduces constraints that can't be gotten around. But the problem is that these bills that get brought forth that are horrible, nobody wants them, there's an outrage for it, they take it away and then they just bring it back. They rebrand it, they stick it into some omnibus bill. And so, no, this is the goal. This is where we're going. They have to put this in because it's the final piece that they need for the censorship and control. So maybe we defeat it now and, it comes back and...
We have a pretty good crisis unfolding as we speak, and that's the banking crisis.
So think about the banking crisis. So you lost your money in the bank, but don't worry, the FDIC has it insured. No big deal.
But you want
so
it,
if you want to get your $250,000 that FDIC is insuring, just fill out these forms, download this wallet, and there's your money. If you go back to when the pandemic first broke out and they started putting the stimulus packages together, in the first stimulus package bill, they put the CBDC language in there. Now it got defeated and it got kicked out, but they were sneaking it into that bill. And so you would like to think they wouldn't be able to sneak it, but they do it all the time.
CBDC is coming. Yes, the CBDC is evil. They say that gold is the solution there. Why would it not be?
Sure. So gold was money for 5,000 years. And so, it carries a lot of the attributes of money. So money, at the end of the day, none of us want money. We want the things that money buys us, goods and services. So money is just a medium of exchange. And so in order for something to be a good money, it must have a couple main attributes. It needs to be divisible, durable, recognizable, fungible. But one of those, scarce, but also one of those is it needs to be portable and it must be able to transport it. And so the problem that gold ran into is that the velocity, the speed is very slow. If I want to pay you gold and you're right there, no big deal, I put it on the table. If you're across the country or across the world, the settlement gets very slow. And so in order to speed that up, it had to go into a bank. Now the banker would carry a ledger and he would just mark from my ledger to your ledger. But the problem that we ran into and will always run into is who controls the ledger? And how do we trust that person? How do we know that he doesn't say there's more than it is? How do we know he doesn't steal it, and all the problems that it has? And so we've already seen the problems that will happen. FDR stole the gold in 1933. And so we've already seen that. So they want to return to gold, but how? Now, back then, we were still in an industrial world, meaning a physical world, right? Today, we're in an information world. Today, the world is connected by the internet. Everything's being done digitally. And so gold will not work in that environment. It just won't. Now, they want to go to some gold-backed digital
Central
currency,
bank
but we go back to the same problem that we had in the past. How do we go, as the world has moved forward, how do we go backwards? What happens with new technology? So I like E.B. Tucker. I've followed his information for a long time. Sorry, buddy, you're wrong. So if you understand how technology works, there's something called a diffusion of innovation. So it's like a bell curve. And you have the innovators, the people who create it. Then you have the early adopters, the true believers. Those are Robert and I. We didn't create it, but we're the true believers. But then there's something called a chasm before the early majority comes in. The chasm is where something has to change in someone's perspective to be able to bring the early majority in. And so I think it's actually the opposite way. And the reason why is so you have a brand new technology and people are like, what is this Bitcoin, some magic internet money? I can't trust it. I don't hold it in my hand. This is what the gold bugs say. Something digital could never work. I would never use that. So it's the CBDC that will actually normalize digital money, not the other way around. CBDCs will be like, well, no, this is from the government. This is safe. You can trust it. So then people will use it. So they should have started with the CBDC. People will get used to this digital money. Then they go, okay, well, I'll give Bitcoin a try. So that's the first thing, the fusion of innovations. You have to understand that. The second thing I would say is, sure, we've heard we don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto is. We use all types of technologies. We don't know who invented them, like a wheel. We all drive on them every day. I don't know who invented the wheel, but yet I use it. But ultimately what I would say is about, was it created by the CIA? And people would ask that with fear, like there's some sort of a backdoor built in, they could rug pull it or whatever. And all the other cryptocurrencies out there, they're proprietary. There's proprietary code, so we don't know how they work. And they want to keep it that way because that's their secret, right? Bitcoin is open source. We say don't trust, verify. So it's open source. We can see all the code. There is no backdoors built into that. So maybe, hypothetically, potentially, the CIA did create it. Sure, maybe. But there's no backdoors. It's open source. And so we can see that. We know that.